place. I've only got a brief window in which to open the portal with the spell. The spell. Jarrig, Capping. No, it's the other way around. Shacked glass. Capping, Jarrig. August Clitchabon, Ulcavon. It's creepy. I like it. It is upon us, the fabled eve of the thinning of the veil, the eve of all souls, when we dress up as the living dead and play trick or treat and share the wits out of our friends and family, to honour life and them that's gone away into the clay. The material world can only show you so much. It's the world beyond this one. Land of ghosts and goblins, sprites and spirits, shapeshifters and werewolves that hold the key to unlock the chaos of this world. I, of course, am dressed as a member of the fungi family, not the famous Monaghan mushroom variety that you might be familiar with, but a rare and uncanny variety known as the shaggy ink cap, otherwise known as lawyer's wig, shaggy mane, or if you prefer the Latin, Coprinus chromatus. If you are careful, you may peel your eyes to identify the shaggy ink-cap mushroom in this very forest, or indeed in your garden at home. It is easy to find with its black and white head dripping with dark black ink. I use its natural black ink to make my drawings and write my stories. Can you see what I see? A half cat, half girl with feathered plumage. My dearest little creepy crawly sweetie friends, I'm here to tell you a story from the great cauldron. The first iron cooking utensil, a symbol of transformation. Spatica fastigiata, the tree of the dead, the tree of poisonous seeds. You know the yew, don't you? The yew tree with its thin pine needles, sharp as a razor, full of the blade. A perfect example of a tree associated with the spirit world. Found in almost every graveyard in Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales. These trees can live to almost 2,000 years. For hundreds and hundreds of years, its drooping branches fall to the ground, lifeless and dead. But going into the earth, they form new trunks in a miraculous waking from the dead. The yew comes back from the dead, forming more yew. But beware, as this tree's berries contain highly toxic compounds that again reinforce its connection with death. The fairies, as you may already know, are strange, unpredictable creatures. In some cases, they can turn people to stone for spite. Frozen in stone in a process called petrification. They can shapeshift into flora or fauna, shapeshifting into plant or animal. And the next story I'm about to tell you is about an Irish woman called Bridget, who people say was taken away from the material world and replaced by a fairy or a witch. We're not quite sure. Are you a witch or are you a fairy? Are you the wife of Michael Cleary? Here come I, bridie-o, on a milk-white toad. My leaves are tired and my little cauliflower head is all charcoal. I've just got back from a great night's crack, dancing with the fairy folk, up the town, down the rushy glen and into the local fairy ring. Me husband swears I'm different now since I've discovered the dancing. He says he'll drive it out of me while I'm still alive and prancing. He thinks I've been snatched away, exchanged or muddled up with darker and mysterious forces. I tell him to wise up. He says I look vacant or like I just rolled through a hedge. Says I, what are you saying? He says, aye, I think you've been swapped for a veg. He is right stubborn when he takes the notion, so I best be on my guard next time when my dancing juices jump into motion. Next evening, as the day grew long and dark, I felt a brewing in me, right there on my little veggie heart. I dreamt of flashing fairy lights, fairy music, and for sure, them fancy fairy long green beans wrapped up in white sugary fairy furs. Sure, I paraded up there as though I'd nowhere else to be, and I stepped right in that fairy ring and started at my fairy glow sticking. Hubby followed me that night and the whole thing took a turn, for hubby thought he'd singe me to cure me with a born. He shouted and he scolded me, yelled, "Tell me, are you Bridie? Are you the wife of Michael Cleary?" I said, "You're mad in the head. I'm only out in the tiles with me friends. You better catch a hoult of yourself before you give me the bends. I am a regular human, just a bit leafy and airy-fairy. And yeah, I still fancy going vegan. I still think I'm allergic to dairy. Do I look like a goose you hang over the fire, a fruit or a vegetable? You can't call me a liar." "She must be a fairy," they say. "She's away with the boards." Charcoaled and bedridden, you echo these words. Are you a witch or are you a fairy? Are you the wife of Michael Cleary? Are you a witch or are you a fairy? Are you the wife of Michael Cleary? Are you a witch or are you a fairy? Are you the wife of Michael Cleary? Michael Cleary. Are you a witch or are you a fairy? Are you the wife of Michael Cleary? Are you a witch or are you a fairy? Are you the wife of Michael Cleary? A long time ago, fado, fado, there lived an old woman. Shan Van or Callaghan Kilwar, wise old woman, named Biddy rarely early. It is believed that she was one of the Sidhe or the fairy folk. She could cure
the plague within, the plague without, the palsy and the gout. More to the point, if you bring me an old woman of 70 with a knuckle bone of her toe broke, I can fix it again.
All right, settle down, Biddy. Let me tell the story. People would travel from every inch of Ireland, and some even as far as England, to be cured by this curious, wise old woman. Shan Van Callaghan Kilwar. She wasn't always thought kindly of, and there were some that thought she must be a crooked witch, for she was impossibly old and was just as likely to help a soul as hinder one. Rumour had it that she was over 200 years old. People feared Biddy. She was a woman that could see into the future with her mystical blue bottle, gifted to her by her mother, who was also a great healer. The sun was setting on the horizon when a farmer 9 fields over was groaning with exhaustion. He took a moment to rest, leaned on his stick, but his feet sank deeper into the mucky puddles, right up to his ankles. He had to pull his feet free, for it had such a strong hold on him. Heavily he clambered through ditches with the wind and the rain beating hard, cutting the eyes out of his head. It was so bitterly cold. Sean McKenna was looking for his 2 cows that had gone missing that morning. Dusk had gathered in the hollow, and only the tips of the pine trees had the remaining light of the sun. He shook his head and squeezed his eyes shut. Beads of sweat ran from his forehead, and coloured spots swam behind his closed eyelids. He thought about his bed, and he wished to God that he was in it. The man breathed deeply to settle himself. He caught an elusive odour that drifted past his nose. There was smoke skimming on the twilight air. Over the hill, down in the hollow, he saw a mound of earth, overgrown with weeds and briars. There were great big trees towering over it. Surely no one could live there. There isn't even a road into it, he pondered. He followed the smoke and made his way down to what appeared to be a faint, glowing, orangey red light. He could feel a strange presence, hungry eyes crawling over his skin from the long grasses as he passed. Sean had almost reached the house. "Good evening," a crooked old woman called from the open door. "I've been expecting you." Sean froze stiff with fright. "I can offer you food and drink." There was something unnerving about this weird old woman that chilled him to the marrow bone. But the thought of food and shelter set his stomach rumbling. He entered the strange hovel and took a seat by the fire. She handed him a silver goblet. "Here, take a drink of this I brewed it myself." He drank the strong herbal liquid, and in one sup it slipped right down into his bullock and warmed him to the very core. "We will eat soon," she said, reassuring him. Suddenly, she cocked her head sideways and her eyes glazed over with the darkness. "What is it?" Sean begged. "Shh! Shush yourself!" Then he heard it, the low, soul-destroying howling that echoed down from the hills. It sounded like the howling of the damned. "It is the wolves," the old woman replied, standing at the door with her hand on the latch, her eyes widening and her mouth drooling from her yellow-stained molars. Sean's chest began to tighten, the sweat thickening on his entire body. He began to sob with fear. Why is this happening to me?" He felt a dizzy spell come over him when the door flung wide open and there stood a grey wolf, panting in the doorway heavily. Sean's head was spinning and he looked frantically around the room for his stick, yelling for help. But there was no one there to help him. The wolf paced slowly towards him and then pierced his gaze for what felt like an eternity. The wolf then crosses the room to enter the other room in the cottage and closes the door. "What have I gotten myself into? You bit off more than you can chew," Sean cried, burying his face in his hands. The howls continued to pound his head. And another animal shadows the doorway, this time a dark-coated, larger wolf, hot with sweat and fiercely panting. Sean feels a pain in his head and it shoots down his right arm. This is all too much for him. He falls on the ground with a thud. When he awoke, there was a young boy and girl sat either side of him. They were nursing him and fixing him goblets of well water. One had grey hair and the other had jet black flowing tresses, much like the wolves. They spoke in unison. "We have met before." No, I don't. Yes, a long time ago. I don't think so. Sean fumbled in confusion. "Do you remember rescuing a young dog from a bog 20 years ago? That was my brother." "Me," the boy spoke in a soft voice. I remember," Sean spoke, "and now we will return that service." "There's nothing I want from you," Sean whispered. "You have lost your animals, 2 cows, almost quarter of your herd. We will return them as a thank you." Sean's eyes rolled back in his forehead and he fell back into a deep, deep sleep. When the farmer awoke, he was in his own barn, the morning sun on his face and straw in his hair. Waiting outside for him were 2 brand new cows. Now they weren't his own cows, but they were like nothing he had ever seen before. Giant-bodied, long-horned cows with teeny-weeny beady eyes. And he found out later that day that the milk yield was phenomenal. Sean guessed that they were a gift from the werewolves and always ensured that a little offering of food was left on the window ledge every evening. It was always gone in the morning. Sean strangely never had any issues with his cows again, even when all the neighbouring farmers had troubles with foxes and hares. His livestock was unscathed. When he died, 2 years later, the cows disappeared and the local people heard the mournful howling of dogs coming from the direction of the graveyard.